Guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going over a 2022 Senate election predictions. Before we get into the video, make sure you subscribe, click that like button, comment down below any suggestions, and let's get into the video. So in the beginning, Democrats start off with 36 seats, the Republicans with 30 seats. So I'm going to characterize safe states with 15%, decided by a 15% margin of victory. Likely states between 5 and 15 points. Lean states between 1 and 5 points. And tilt states under 1%. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and let's get into it. So as for Republican safe, calm, I definitely think, and I don't think Missouri's going to be safe because of Roy Blunt retirement. I definitely think that Missouri is going to be competitive. It's not going to be a very competitive state. I think it's going to be more competitive than Iowa. Democrats have just a 12% chance of winning in Missouri, and their Democratic nominee is probably going to be between. I think it's probably going to be Quinton Lucas. I think he does have that best shot there. If you look at the past 90 days, he wasn't in the head. He was ahead for most of the time. So he's sort of fell down on those rankings. I still think he's the most likely Democratic candidate, but their chances are very low. For Republicans, I still think they're going to nominate Eric Greitens, not Eric Schmidt. Probably not the best candidate, but I think that's probably going to be put into the likely column because probably not the best candidate. However, in Iowa, I definitely think Iowa's going to be safe. If you look, I think Iowa is probably going to be safe because, if Pat Grassley, if Chuck Grassley does retire, it's probably going to be Pat Grassley. Like, if you look at the betting odds in Iowa, I think Chuck Grassley is going to retire. So Republicans have a 90-cent share winning that seat. Chuck Grassley, 52 cents. Pat Grassley, 25 cents. And just Ashley Hinson, the next candidate, just down at 8 cents. So if Chuck Grassley does choose to retire, Pat Grassley is going to be the nominee. Of course, Chuck Grassley does head, is a lot, is Pat Grassley's trailing below him. But if Chuck Grassley does choose to retire, which we do not know what's going to happen, I think he's probably going to retire, especially at his age. He's 87 years old. If he, does run for re-election, he'll be 93 when he finishes. He'll be around 95 when he finishes his term. So, I definitely think Pat Grassley's probably going to take his place. But, however, that doesn't change my mind in Iowa being safe, whether it's Pat Grassley or Chuck Grassley. I think Iowa should be really safe. Chuck Grassley, he wins elections here by 25 points as Rob Portman. Pat Grassley is his grandson. So I still think that even if Pat Grassley were to be the nominee, it might not have been margins that Chuck Grassley was able to win, but I still think he could solidly carry that by maybe 15 points or so. In Kentucky, I still think that's going to be a hole. I still think Rand Paul, is a Trump-like candidate. Kentucky is, definitely supports Trump-like candidates. Democrats really have no shot in Kentucky. Look at the margin of victory for Donald Trump was, very big. I believe it was Mitch McConnell's race. Rand Paul's will be in 2022. Mitch McConnell still won it by, considerable amount in Kentucky. Donald Trump was able to win 62.1% of the vote to Joe Biden's 36.2%. And as for the Senate, he won 57.8%, McGrath 38.2%. So definitely McConnell was underperforming Donald Trump, especially in Franklin County. You compare the numbers. It did go to Trump, but McGrath was still able to carry Franklin County. Donald Trump only won it by 1%. So that's one of the competitive counties. Louisville and Lexington still remain very, very liberal. So, I definitely think that if it were to be, I still think Rand Paul would be reelected. He used to be, someone against Donald Trump. Now he still does support Donald Trump, and I think that they're going to be able to carry that. Indiana, it is Mike Pence's home state. It's reliably Republican. I still think that is going to head to the Republicans, as well as Alabama. A retirement in Alabama. I definitely think that in Alabama, due to the retirement, it's not going to be huge margins, especially because you look at Doug Jones. He lost in 2020, so that was another flip. I definitely think Mo Brooks is going to win the nomination. There's really no other candidates. Started off at just 37 cents. He's now at around, he's trailing at one point. It was 90 cents. Now he's around 76 cents. So other candidates are just under 20. Britt is at 22. Katie Britt. So I don't think, I still think Mo Brooks is still going to be able to pull off a victory. Because of the retirement in Alabama, it's definitely going to still be a safe state for Republicans, as well as in Idaho and Utah. I think Mike Lee has a very good shot at winning re-election here. His numbers were pretty big. The Democrats really have entirely no chance of flipping that state. It still continues. Can't find any betting odds. Still continues to shift to the left. But I definitely think it's going to be a very reliable Republican state. Donald Trump was able to win the state with 58.2% of the vote. In the governor's race, Spencer Cox was able to win 63.9% of the vote. And, it's all going to be determined, these suburban areas. Salt Lake City, obviously, on the presidential level, Salt Lake City did go to Joe Biden. But still, Salt Lake City, just depending on the numbers, it goes to Joe Biden. If it's, by very large amounts, could cause Joe Biden to narrow up the margin. Definitely not going to be a victory in Utah. So I definitely think Republicans are going to hold on, as well as in Idaho. And South Carolina, Tim Scott, he was able to do well. I think he's going to win by a much bigger amount than Lindsey Graham. Let's look at Lindsey Graham's numbers. I don't think his numbers were too well for South Carolina, especially being a senator who's been in office for quite a decent amount of time. He only won, Trump won by 12% or so. On the Senate-wise, Lindsey Graham was able to do around the same, about less than Donald Trump. And I definitely think that Lindsey Graham, Tim Scott's to be able to do a lot better than Lindsey Graham. I think it's definitely going to be a lot less competitive. Obviously Jamie Harrison, he spent, a lot of money on that race, and still Lindsey Graham was able to win it by around about 10 points or so, more than 10 points. Yeah, a little more than 10 points, 10.3%. I still think Republicans are going to hold on to that safe because of Tim Scott. I think it's going to be around 15 points for Tim Scott. As for Democratic states, Schwartz is going to win in Hawaii, as well as Colorado. I could potentially be seeing that likely. Colorado, was a flip from 2020. It was definitely, many people were expecting that to be a flip. Cory Gardner, he was an incumbent senator who lost that seat to his Democratic challenger, Hickenlooper. And I think that in the future, this seat is going to become more and more Democratic. Democrats are able to flip more seats in Colorado. I think that's still going to be considered safe over there, as well as Illinois. The Rust Belt region is also, is going to be in play. Michigan will not be in play. It's going to be Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. They're really going to be really competitive. California, Oregon, and Washington, Patty Murphy's going to probably be reelected again. And Alex Padilla, maybe not the amounts Kamala Harris is winning because, he's not an incumbent. But still, he's going to win by more than 15 points. And definitely over 20 points in California. That race is very, very solid Democratic. I think he's going to win there. Sorry, I don't know why I have Nevada. Okay, so there we go. 46 Democrats to 44 Republicans. In Ohio, I think Republicans are going to maintain a victory there. It was a pretty solid race, because of the retirement. It's been considered a toss-up, but as it becomes more conservative, especially due to Rob Portman's retirement, it's going to be there's not going to be a victory in Ohio around like 20 points, 25 points because of Rob Portman. So I definitely think Ohio is going to be a race that's not going to be as Rob Portman's race. But I definitely think Josh Mandel is going to win by a pretty decent amount there, around at least more than 5 points, maybe around the same amount Donald Trump won it. possibly more, possibly less. It's probably going to float around. I also think that Lisa Murkowski, without the sort of support of Trump, in 2022, Donald Trump, might have that chance to remove her. That's going to be likely. I definitely think it's probably going to be. Look at the Senate race in Alaska. I think Lisa Murkowski she's not going to be able to do very well compared because of Donald Trump's hatred for her. 2016, I believe it was in 2016 when she was running. Yeah, so I definitely think in Alaska most of her challengers are going to be independents, and I think because Donald Trump's hatred for Lisa Murkowski grows, I don't think she's going to be I think her margins are going to shrink down. Look back at 2016, she won only 44.4% of the vote to a Libertarian at 29.2%, and so that was her third term, and now she's running for her fourth term. That will be about 24 years in office. So I definitely think she served a while, and she's an incumbent, but I still think it's going to be around likely and safe. I could definitely see that floating into the likely column around 13, 14 points of victory for her there. Because it was decided by around 15 points. I think this race is becoming more Democratic. I think she's not going to win by a safe margin over there. In Florida, I definitely think Florida could be likely, possibly leads, because Val Demings is probably going to be the candidate against, Marco Rubio. I still think that's going to be likely state. I don't think Florida's going to be super competitive for Democrats to reach, and I don't think, despite Val Demings possibly being a good candidate, she's definitely not going to win that race, and, it is sort of out of question to Democrats win on the Senate level in Florida, despite it being possible on the presidential level. I definitely could think. I think Marco Rubio was. Ron DeSantis is also has a governor race in 2022. I also think Ron DeSantis would be reelected. Because 2022 is expected to be a Republican year. Even in a Democratic year, even in 2018, Ron DeSantis was able to win by a very small amount in a 40-seat gain for the Democrats in the House of Representatives. Marco Rubio was able to win by a narrow, 0.5% margin, less than 0.5. So I think in a red wave year, I think he's going to do much better, as well as Rubio. I think Rubio's going to win by about the same amount, maybe around 5, 6, 7 points, around there for Marco Rubio. We're moving into the leans and tilt areas. So we begin in North Carolina. I think in North Carolina, Republicans are going to very narrowly hold on to North Carolina, around a percentage point or so. This will fluctuate with the Trump endorsement of Ted Budd and Laura Trump saying she won't be running. I don't think, despite Pat McCrory, if Pat McCrory was the candidate, I definitely think there would be a much better chance for Democrats to win. Pat McCrory was leading in the polls because he was known as the former governor, and people really know him, but a lot, I don't think he's a very popular person. So I definitely think Pat McCrory is probably going to lose. He's in sort of a similar situation to Matt Gaetz and how his unpopularity floats around. So I definitely think that Pat McCrory, if he's a candidate, I think it's going to be very narrow. But I think Ted Budd is probably the most likely candidate, not Mark Walker, because of Donald Trump's endorsement. Donald Trump has endorsed Ted Budd for someone to replace, Laura Trump not running due to family and other stuff. She won't be running. So in order to make up for Laura Trump not running in the Senate race, he has endorsed Ted Budd, which I think wouldn't be a bad choice, but it's just really missing off in the polls. The polling data, he's a 5% in the polling data. So I think if it was not for Donald Trump's endorsement, Ted Budd really wouldn't have an impact in North Carolina. And we move on to Georgia. This is Raphael Warnock's seat, the special election that was up just, less than 2 years afterwards because of the runoff. 2 years with the runoff, without the runoff, but because there was a runoff, that was 2 years later. I definitely think Raphael Warnock will be reelected. Herschel Walker might have a chance I don't know if it's going to be leans or tilt. I think it's going to be around that area. I could considerably, I'm actually going to move that down to tilt for Raphael Warnock because, I think Herschel Walker has that sort of appeal as a football player. But I don't think he's made to run for Senate, despite being a famous football player and a big name, similar to Donald Trump. He doesn't really have someone who can actually run for Senate, despite being a big name. He's not someone who's really qualified to be a senator, and I don't think he's going to be able to win against Raphael Warnock, especially because Raphael Warnock is an incumbent. I possibly could see. I think Herschel Walker could do better than Kelly Loeffler, but I just don't see him being able to flip the seat from the Democrats. In Pennsylvania, I think it could be possibly, likely in that region for John Fetterman. John Fetterman is a very strong Democratic candidate. He was with Tom Wolf. Because he isn't an incumbent, I think it's going to be leans. Just because the factor is he's not an incumbent, and this is an open race held by Republicans in the past. So I think just because it was formerly held by Republicans, Republicans definitely have the advantage. Because it is an incumbent, it was an incumbent there, but because of their retirement, because of Richard Burr's retirement, not Richard Burr's retirement, Pat Toomey's retirement. I think if Pat Toomey didn't retire, obviously he's going to retire, and we have full news that he's going to retire. I think it's going to be moved down to leans, because, even if Pat Toomey ran against John Fetterman, I don't think Pat Toomey would hold on to a seat, despite him being the incumbent. John Fetterman was the lieutenant governor of Tom Wolf, someone who won his governor race by more than 17 points. And in order for him to lose, we need a very, very strong candidate, someone like John Fetterman, who's not obviously going to do as well as Tom Wolf, but he has been lieutenant governor, and people know him by his name because he has some sort of familiar-esque type of candidate, back in Obama's time, as well as Tom Wolf as governor. He was lieutenant governor, so he has that, sort of name there. So that is the first flip of the night. Pennsylvania, 48-48. That's the first flip of the night in Pennsylvania. So that puts Democrats at 51 right now, unless Republicans are able to flip any other Democratic races, any other Democratic held races, and they might be able to push themselves within that game. As for Arizona, I think Democrats are going to hold on. Mark Kelly, the special election, he's up. I think he was able to win by a big amount. Whoever runs, it's going to be a victory for Mark Kelly. Republicans don't have a big candidate in mind. Doug Ducey could be one, Mark Brnovich, but they're not going to win, against someone like Mark Kelly, especially the incumbent factor, Hispanic and Latino voters turning away from the Republicans. And I don't think, he's going to have that victory, as well as in Nevada. Catherine Cortez Masto, she's an incumbent. She's an incumbent Democrat, and I think she's going to be reelected. Republicans have a very, very small chance in order to defeat Catherine Cortez Masto. We have 2 seats remaining in Wisconsin, currently held by a Republican. We don't know if Ron Johnson is retiring. As well as in New Hampshire, which is a Democratic-held seat. So no matter what happens to those 2 races, because of Vice President Kamala Harris, Democrats still continue to maintain their majority in the Senate. So if we begin in New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan, obviously, she is the incumbent Democrat. So I don't even know if Chris Sununu is running, but even if Chris Sununu runs, the race is going to be very competitive. If Chris Sununu runs, it's probably going to be tilt or possibly leans. If Chris Sununu chooses not to run, it might be possibly in that likely area for Maggie Hassan. I'm going to put it in leans just because I don't know if he's running or not, but that's probably where it's going to stand around now. Whether he's running or not, I have a feeling that they're not going to win. Even if he runs, there's a chance that he doesn't win. So if he doesn't run, there's 100% sure that in New Hampshire, if Chris Sununu chooses not to run, then it will definitely go to Maggie Hassan. If he does run, I still think it has a higher chance that it'll go to Maggie Hassan, but there's still a chance that Chris Sununu can win, but that chance is slim. And as for Wisconsin, we don't even know if Ron Johnson is running or not. But all I know is that Ron Johnson might have the advantage because he's an incumbent, but he's changed the path. He's going towards Donald Trump. He supported Donald Trump throughout his campaign, and I feel like he's a very Trump-esque candidate. So even if he does run for re-election, I feel like his chances are slim. They are on a 45% chance of winning against other candidates. We don't know exactly who yet in Wisconsin. And if he doesn't run, it's going to be a Democratic flip. If he does run, I still think same case in New Hampshire. If he does run, I still think, if he does run for re-election, I think it could go either way, but I still think Democrats have just a slightly better chance. So here is the 2022 Senate election map. 52 seats for Democrats, 48 seats for Republicans. That means Chuck Schumer will still maintain the majority leader's office, and Mitch McConnell, minority leader. The Senate will maintain in Democratic hands. Democrats will have a net gain of 2 seats, and Republicans have a loss of 2 seats. So I hope you guys enjoy, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.